The NBA season is now officially done, and we are just 1 week away from the NBA draft. And CBS Sports is about to give you our very latest mock. I'm Amanda Guerra. In just a second, I will be joined by Avery Johnson and Gary Parrish. But first, taking a look at the lottery order, the Pistons selecting first overall for the first time in more than 50 years. So will they take presumptive number one, Cade Cunningham? The Magic also have a couple picks in the top 10, 5 and 8. The Warriors have a handful of lottery picks as well, so let's get into it. We have two GMs today, Avery Johnson, Gary Parrish picking the first round of the draft. Avery, you're up first with the Pistons, and you have them selecting, no big surprise here, Cade Cunningham, his head coach calling him a once-in-a-lifetime person. Avery, what else do we need to know?
Just love Cade Cunningham. It was funny at the Detroit Tigers game a couple of days ago, the fans were shouting his name, but this is a no-brainer. This kid's, 6'8", he can handle the ball, pass, dribble, and shoot. He's an exceptional guard with athleticism. He can rebound the basketball. He shoots over 40% from the three-point line. So this is going to make Dwayne Casey, his coach, a lot happier because his offense is going to work a lot more efficiently with Cade Cunningham on the floor.
With the second overall pick, Gary has the Houston Rockets selecting Jalen Green. He was the first player to sign with NBA G League Ignite, ranked by ESPN as the #1 prospect in the class of 2020. And Gary, this is a kid that has shown significant improvement in his shooting.
Yeah, he was really impressive as a just out of high school player performing against professionals with the G League Ignite. And you're talking about somebody, Amanda, who has a chance to be an NBA scoring champion someday. I think he's the most gifted scorer in this draft. He's a wing with tremendous size who is a great athlete as well. I do agree with Coach that Cade Cunningham is going to be the #1 pick in this draft, but if you were trying to explore other options, Jalen Green would probably be the first place you looked. Houston in recent years has had some real star power in that franchise. James Harden, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook. Right now they have none. And simply put, I think Jalen Green is the player with the best opportunity, other than Cade Cunningham, to be a star in this draft. And that's why if you're the Houston Rockets and Cunningham's off the board, you take him #2.
With the third overall pick, Avery has the Cleveland Cavaliers selecting Evan Mobley from USC. Avery, when they beat KU in the second round, Bill Self said he's a couple pounds away from being an NBA All-Star. So let's say he gets those couple of pounds. How does he translate to the NBA?
Yeah, this was a little bit of a toss-up for me, but I think Evan Mobley, his skill set really transfers to the NBA. He's a kid that has a very high ceiling, 7-footer. He shot 58% from the field last year. He's improved as a three-point shooter. I think his three-point shooting will translate behind the NBA line. But again, this was a toss-up for me. Could have easily taken Jalen Suggs here, but I'm looking at the Cleveland roster with potentially Colin Sexton, who I coached at Alabama, and Darius Garland still on the roster. If one of those guys don't get traded, they don't need at that point another guard. So I think Evan Mobley is the right fit, especially because I feel there's going to be a buyout situation with Kevin Love, so he can easily slide in and start on day one.
You mentioned Jalen Suggs there with the fourth overall pick. Gary has Jalen Suggs going to the Raptors. Jalen Suggs, of course, with the Zags. A high floor, some will argue, maybe not as much upside as some others. And, of course, Gary, we all remember his buzzer beater moment against UCLA in the Final Four. Climbed on top of the table. He said he dreamt of that moment. Gary, what else do we need to know about Suggs?
Well, for me, there's clear separation between 4 and 5 in this draft. And the top 4 players, in my opinion, should be Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Jalen Green, and Jalen Suggs in some order. So with Cunningham and Mobley and Green off the board, for me, this is obviously Jalen Suggs. He'd be terrific playing with Fred VanVleet in Toronto. And you're talking about a young man who has all of the intangibles to go with the athleticism that NBA franchises desire. I've talked in recent months with Gonzaga coach Mark Few about him, with former Gonzaga assistant, now the head coach at Arizona, Tommy Lloyd, about Jalen Suggs. They rave about him. Great competitor, great teammate, incredible winner, a real thirst for winning, and obviously won at an elite level in his 1 year at college. Was capable of taking over games at Gonzaga, also capable of fitting in and getting his teammates involved. And when you combine everything I've just described with the fact that he is a top shelf athlete as well, then you've got a chance to get something really special. The swing skill is obviously the three-point shot. He did not shoot it well consistently at Gonzaga, but there's a real belief among NBA personnel that he's going to be able to be a competent three-point shooter. And if he develops that to go with everything else, now we're talking about somebody who can be a face of a franchise and, an obvious NBA All-Star.
We've made it to the Magic with the 5th overall pick, the first of 2 in the top 10. Avery, you have them selecting Scotty Barnes out of Florida State. Now, he says he's got some Magic Johnson in him. Avery, what do you say?
Yeah, he definitely has a little bit of Magic Johnson in him. He has the size, 6'9". He can guard any position on the floor. I watched this kid a lot on the AAU circuit. Unfortunately, he signed with another school, which is Florida State. But he's capable of physically dominating anyone on the floor that he's defending. He's got to improve his, three-point shooting. He's not strong from the free throw line. He's got to improve his free throw shooting. But in terms of ball handling, skill set, you can play him across the board. It reminds me a lot of Andre Iguodala, but I think he'll be an even better offensive player. But, keep this kid in Florida. I think it'll be good for the fan base. They're very familiar with him. You got a new coach coming in. He can be another piece that you can build around. Orlando, they traded away basically their entire team during the All-Star break last year. So this is definitely a rebuild, and Barnes is a kid that you can rebuild the team around for the future.
Those are picks 1 through 5. Let's recap what we've got so far. The Pistons taking Cade Cunningham, number 1 overall. No surprise there. Jalen Green going to the Rockets at 2. Now, Avery had the Cavs selecting Evan Mobley, 3rd overall. Said he was a little torn there. They could have taken Jalen Suggs. Instead, Jalen Suggs falling 4th overall to the Raptors. Let's continue here. We've got Oklahoma City up with the 6th overall pick. Gary, you have them selecting Jonathan Kuminga. This is another player who opted for the G League. His coach said he actually thinks he was the most NBA ready, even more so than Jalen Green. Of course, we know the Thunder have a whole bunch of picks here. So Gary, tell us about their first one with Jonathan Kuminga.
Well, that's interesting that his coach would say that, because Jalen Green was the more productive player with the G League Ignite, but Kuminga is similarly an incredible prospect. We're talking about a big wing, a great size for the position, an explosive athlete, absolutely incredible in transition. And if you're Oklahoma City, you're in a total rebuild, and you need to take big swings on prospects that have an opportunity to be special. That's why, if you're OKC and you load up on all these first-round picks going forward, you're not trying to find good players, you're trying to find great ones. And at this point in this draft, Jonathan Kuminga is the player who has the best possibility of being special someday. It will take a minute, and like so many other young guys, he is going to have to improve his jumper, because a big wing who has incredible defensive versatility and top shelf athleticism, like, that's worth something. That guy will be in the NBA for a long time and make $75 million. But if he can add the three-point shot to the natural stuff, well, now that's the difference between making $75 million and $275 million. So if he develops the jump shot, you're going to be thrilled if you get him at 6. And, at this place in the draft again, you want to take a big swing on a young prospect with the best potential. And that appears to be, at least in my mind, at this point, Jonathan Kuminga.
7th overall, we find the Golden State Warriors. They're getting the pick there from Minnesota. Avery, you have them selecting James Bouknight out of UConn, averaged almost 19 points per game. That's the most at UConn since Kemba Walker did it. Of course, there's a lot of questions about what Golden State will do in the draft, but regardless, tell us about Bouknight and what he will mean for a team.
Bouknight, he's an exceptional scorer, basically a 6'4" scoring machine. You know, he averaged nearly 19 and 6 last year, but he's just so explosive with the ball. You know, excellent ball handler. And also, again, I thought about Moses Moody here from Arkansas, but I'm thinking about the fit. I believe that Bouknight plays a little bit better off the ball, and that's very important in Steve Kerr's system because their offense is surrounded around ball movement, player movement, coming off screens, back cutting, flare screens, pin downs. So there's a lot of movement on and off, especially when you're off the ball, because a lot of times they like to play through, believe it or not, Draymond Green and not just Steph Curry. And since Draymond Green is not a great three-point shooter, they need scoring and shooting on the floor surrounding he and Steph Curry. They're getting Klay Thompson back. So I think this would be an excellent choice for the Golden State Warriors.
Coming up at 8 overall, we find the Orlando Magic yet again. 5th overall was their first pick, I should say. Avery had them selecting Scotty Barnes out of Florida State. Gary, you get to pick for the Magic here, and you have them selecting Davion Mitchell. Scott Drew calls him off night because so many great offensive players have off nights against him. So what else do we need to know about Davion off night Mitchell?
Well, I talked to Scott Drew just a few days ago about Davion Mitchell, and he thinks he's going in this range, definitely in the top 10, and perhaps as high as number 4 or number 5. Those are the conversations he's been having with NBA front offices, and Scott just absolutely loves him. You know, I know that there's a tendency among front office executives to fall in love with 19-year-old prospects as opposed to older prospects because theoretically there's more room to grow. And yeah, I agree with that in general, but there's nothing wrong with taking somebody who's a little older who is ready to play right now. You can plug Davion Mitchell into the rotation of even a contending team next season, and he'll perform as a rookie, just tenacious on the defensive end as an on-ball defender, really improved as a shooter. In his final year of college, shot above 42% from three-point range. And so when you've got a point guard who is awesome defending other point guards, and there's a lot of tape out there of him guarding Cade Cunningham, of him guarding Jalen Suggs. I mean, guys who are going to be top 5 picks, and they were having a hard time getting around him. That's what kind of on-ball defender we're talking about. When you got somebody who can do that on one end of the court and then consistently knock down jumpers on the other end of the court, you've got somebody who's ready to play in the modern NBA. And then the mentality, I don't think you can overlook that. There was a scene just before the start of the national championship game where the starters are being introduced, and Davion Mitchell is just staring, glaring at his opponent that he was about to play in a few minutes. So much so that Mark Few actually joked to me, in the subsequent weeks. He's like, I just looked at Davion Mitchell and I was like, is he mad at us? Did we do something to him? He looks angry. He doesn't just look ready. He looks angry, like he wants to destroy us. And that is the mindset he approaches the sport with. And, you talk to anybody who works in the NBA, they want guys like that. Davion Mitchell is going to have a long career, I think. And if you're Orlando and you could come out of this, with Scotty Barnes and Davion Mitchell out of the top 10, I think you got to feel pretty good about it.
I'm not sure if just staring at you guys is going to work from now on, but I may give it a try just to see. Let's go to the 9th overall pick with Sacramento. Avery has them selecting Moses Moody out of Arkansas. Avery, this has been a go-to player for them for day one. What is he going to look like in the NBA?
Yeah, Moses Moody, this is not quite like parting the Red Sea with Moses, but that's another subject. But this kid, 6'6" long combo guard, really smooth mid-range game. I think because of the NBA Finals and the success that a lot of the guards had in the mid-range, that game is, the mid-range game is not obsolete. But love his body, he uses his strength to create shots. He knows how to play through contact. Had a chance to talk to his coach, Eric Musselman, who was my coach, my last coach when I played in the NBA and before I retired in 2004. He was telling me that he knew this kid was a pro from day one. And, he ran a lot of NBA sets. So Moses is going to be very, very comfortable with his transition to the NBA game. He knows the terminology. He knows the coverages on defense. And again, I could have taken this kid at 7, but I think this is the right fit for him. And I think because they don't know what Buddy Hield's future is with the team, I believe that Moses Moody is going to have a long NBA career. I don't know if he'll be a perennial all-star, but he has a huge upside.
At 10 overall, we go to Avery's hometown of New Orleans. The Pelicans there, but Gary gets this pick, and he has them selecting Josh Giddey. This is a kid from Australia, Rookie of the Year in Australia's National Basketball League. He's 6'8", so tall for a point guard, but with great vision there. Gary, this is going to be a horrible joke. How do we get Giddey over Giddey?
He's terrific as a prospect. Only 18 years old and has already performed at a high level against professionals. If you were encouraged by the way LaMelo Ball was able to come into the NBA and from day one be impactful, then that's got to make you, really, keep a close eye on Josh Giddey in this range. There's some thought that New Orleans will prioritize shooting here, and Corey Kispert, probably the best shooter in the draft, is obviously available, and they might go that direction because having as many shooters as you can have around a talent like Zion Williamson, obviously makes some sense. But I just couldn't pass on the talent and the upside here. Like you mentioned, he's a 6'8" playmaker. Some people will call him a point guard. I don't think he's really that, but he is a wing who can handle the ball, who can manipulate defenses, who can, create for himself or his teammates. And, he's just a jump shot away from being really, really special. That's the problem right now, is that he doesn't consistently shoot it well from the perimeter. So you can go under screens, no problem. But, I feel like we've talked about this with every other prospect, especially the young ones so far. The shooting is a skill that can be developed. It doesn't mean that it will be, but there's a long list of players who have gotten way better as shooters once they entered the NBA. And if Josh Giddey can follow that pattern, then New Orleans would have something special.
Free throws can be developed as well, even in one game. Just look at what we saw from Giannis. All right, we made it to 10. Recapping the picks there, 6 through 10. We've got Oklahoma City taking Jonathan Kuminga. Golden State selecting James Bouknight, 7 overall. Of course, a lot of questions with Golden State when it comes to the draft. Many people thinking ultimately they just want a veteran this offseason, but Avery said that he would be a great fit with the Warriors. And then the Orlando Magic, Gary has them selecting Davion Mitchell, said he spoke with Scott Drew. He could potentially go as high as 4 or 5, but in this particular draft, falling to 8. Let's go with the 11th overall pick. Charlotte, Avery has them selecting Gonzaga's Corey Kispert. Consensus, I can say that word, first team All-American. He finishes his career at Gonzaga as the winningest NCAA Division I player in the past 25 years. Avery, we saw him all over the tournament. What does a team get with Corey Kispert?
Well, my buddy Gary Parrish said it. He's the best shooter in the draft. New Orleans could have easily taken him here for all of the right reasons. But you're talking about a young man with just a very quick release. He shot over 44% from behind the three-point line. He just got an exceptional perimeter shooting game. He improved, attacking the basket. Obviously, playing out on the West Coast, they're not in a Power 5 conference, but this is an elite program that knows how to develop pros. Drew Timme will be in the draft next year, but I just really love his aggression. I love his size. And again, you're looking at a guy like Lonzo Ball, who Gary Parrish was 100% right about last year in all of our mock drafts. He's going to pair really well with LaMelo Ball, and with his passing ability to be able to find Kispert anywhere on the floor. And I don't know if Charlotte's going to pick up the option on Malik Monk's contract. So I believe that this will be a really solid fit for Charlotte to have back-to-back years where they've gotten it right in the draft.
12th overall, we head to an area, a team that Avery knows oh so well, the San Antonio Spurs. Gary gets the pick here, though. He has them selecting Isaiah Jackson out of Kentucky. Gary, this is somebody people say, look, he's so physically elite, but he only averaged about 20 minutes per game this past season. What is your opinion on Jackson?
He was not, one of the best freshmen in the country. He was obviously not on one of the best teams in the country as Kentucky struggled in a way that was, historically very, very rare. But with Isaiah Jackson, you're getting somebody who's got a lot of natural stuff. Somebody who, is an incredible athlete, can rim protect, block shots. You can throw lobs to him. He can rim run. I just listed about everything he can do on the offensive end of the court. So that's a work in progress. But the truth is, you mentioned Avery being close with that San Antonio franchise. His number is retired there. He's a Spurs icon. And I would have hated if he would have had to be playing in that backcourt once upon a time without competent bigs. But that is what the Spurs guards are dealing with right now. Once LaMarcus Aldridge took a buyout and then subsequently retired, there's not a lot of talent in that San Antonio front court, and they could certainly use some young, explosive, athletic talent in that front court. And at this point in this draft, Isaiah Jackson is the best candidate for that. You are undeniably taking him here and hoping he develops in a variety of ways, because he is way far away from a finished product. But it's a cliche, but it doesn't make it untrue. There's a lot of stuff that he possesses that you simply cannot teach. And if he can pick up on the stuff that you can teach, then you get somebody who can, rim protect for you in San Antonio for a long, long time.
Let's go to the Pacers with the 13th overall pick. Avery Johnson has them selecting Jared Butler out of Baylor. I love this. Mark Fewan going up against him said he is a complete player. He can guard, he can score mid-range, he can score at the basket, and he is a deadly three-point shooter. So Avery, in your opinion, Jared Butler, is he a complete player?
Oh, he is a complete player, Amanda. And Gary knows this. When I was coaching at Alabama, we were his first Power 5 offer. Basically discovered this kid when he was in 9th or 10th grade, playing outside of New Orleans at Reserve Christian. So I know this kid very well. Had him at Alabama for 2 months before we released him and he transferred to Baylor. But this kid is just a two-way player. He plays on both ends of the floor. He has range when he crosses half court. That was one of the things that really impressed me with Jared. Just his range, his basketball IQ. He played football also in high school, quarterback and wide receiver. So he's just a multi-dimensional, multi-sport athlete, very strong character, just exceptional in so many ways. The only question mark he had, which now the NBA has released, that he's medically cleared for any team to draft him or to play on any team. So I think that would probably make a couple of teams hesitant. But if he's medically cleared, which he is, and he's ready to go, I think that's the only thing holding him back. He would be a top 10 pick if that wasn't a question mark. And he had just an extraordinary career at Baylor. Most outstanding player in the Final Four. And believe me, this kid's game translates to the NBA level from day one.
At 14, we find Golden State yet again, their second pick in the top 14. We also saw them at 7, and Avery had them selecting James Bouknight here. So to 14, Gary, you have them selecting Alperen Şengün, a Turkish Super League regular season MVP at the age of just 18. He's about to turn 19. So Gary, introduce us to him.
Well, from a production standpoint, as an 18-year-old playing in Europe, he is historically great. If you are somebody that loves advanced stats and swears by the metrics, you're going to be somebody who is really interested in this prospect. We've talked about Evan Mobley already as a near perfect modern NBA center, prospect at least. Alperen Sengun is not quite that. He's more of a traditional center than a modern center. He's gonna play around the rim, score in the low post. He can also catch it at the elbow and make plays. Gets to the free throw line at an incredible rate. Just a really gifted, offensive center from about 15 feet in. He's still a little too inconsistent to be reliable at the three-point line, but there's some thought that he can add that with time. The concerns, to the extent that there are concerns, are on the defensive end. He's a little undersized for a traditional center. He is not a great athlete. He doesn't move his feet really, really well. It's interesting. He's got good footwork when he catches the ball down around the post. But in terms of trying to guard in space, the feet are a little slow, and it can cause some issues. And that is something that can become a real liability, in the NBA, with the way the game is played today. Even, a defensive player of the year like Rudy Gobert finds himself in tough spots when other teams play five small guys who can all shoot, because at that point Gobert is asked to guard in space, and though he is great at other things, he can struggle with that. We just saw it in these NBA finals. The Bucks were switching every ball screen in game one and playing Brook Lopez in drop coverage. And after that one game, when Chris Paul and Devin Booker just killed them, they had to switch their entire approach or decide not to play Brook Lopez, one of the two. And so there's some concern that when you draft a traditional center who might have trouble guarding in space, that that could become a liability, and it could be something that forces you to take him out of games. But he's so gifted and productive on the offensive end that in this range, he's worth a serious look, and he's obviously got a chance to be really, really special.
Let's go to 15. Avery has Washington selecting Franz Wagner. I just kind of like saying that. 2 seasons in Michigan. His head coach saying it's a guy with a high IQ, high ceiling, loves basketball. He's a grinder. Avery, what else?
Yeah, you said his name better than me, Wagner. But Juwan Howard played for me when I was coaching the Mavericks, and he raised about Franz. He loves, his weak side shot blocking ability. He's got really good court vision. He knows how to move to open spaces on the floor. He's just got to get a little bit more physically stronger. There were some games where teams really increased their physicality against him, and he just couldn't complete some of his plays, especially, on some of his drives to the basket. So just got to get a little bit stronger. But, obviously he knocked down the three. He improved, at slashing to the basket. Well coached with Juwan Howard. He knows, obviously, from a family standpoint, the NBA game. So I think this is a nice fit, because with Washington, it's all about who can surround Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook, who can play with those guys. And they definitely need guys that can spread the floor with high basketball IQ, with size, especially when you're rebooting your franchise, especially with hiring a new coach.
That's week 16. We find the Thunder again, their second pick so far. Gary, yeah, the first one, Oklahoma City, selecting 6th overall, taking Jonathan Kuminga here. Here, Gary, you have them taking Keon Johnson out of Tennessee. Tell us why.
They're not similar players, Kuminga and Johnson, but they are similar in the sense that they've got some of the best upsides available in this draft. Keon Johnson is a one-and-done player, out of Tennessee. He was a work in progress at Tennessee, evidence being that he only played 13 minutes in the season opener. Obviously got better as the season progressed. I say that to say this: he's going to be a work in progress in the NBA as well. But we're talking about a 6'5" athlete who jumps out of the gym, who is already a pretty good, catch it and drive it player. It has to add some strength, but with his ability, at 6'5" to put it on the floor and get to the rim, he's going to get to the free throw line, or at least theoretically, he should get to the free throw line a lot. A great on-ball defender, causes real problems with his size and athleticism for opposing guards. And, like most people his age, if he can ever figure out how to consistently, make shots from the perimeter, then just about every other box is checked. So, when you are a franchise like this franchise, as we've talked about before, you're trying to add potential stars, not just role players who can help you next season. Like if you're a Utah team or a Denver team or a Milwaukee team, you might want to spend a first-round pick on somebody you think can help you next season because you're trying to win a lot of games next season. That's not the case here. You're trying to add people who can be great in 3 years, and Keon Johnson's got a chance to do that.
Wizards at 17. Avery, you have them selecting Cameron Thomas from LSU, led the SEC with 23 points per game as a freshman. He's actually born in Japan, went to high school there in Virginia, Oak Hill Academy, all-time leading scorer. Avery hopefully got some good food while he was down there at LSU. That is a soft spot for you and I. What else do we need to know about him?
Well, Cam Thomas, this kid is a scoring machine. You alluded to it, 23 points a game. Fantastic free throw shooter, but he's capable of scoring, especially in isolations. Think a little bit like Lou Williams from the Atlanta Hawks in multiple six-man of the year. I don't know if Cam will ever consistently start in the NBA, but boy, he can make an entire career out of being a six-man. He could be that microwave type of a guard that comes off the bench and provide that instant offense. He got really good size, but he is a scoring machine. That's what he does. If he would be a designated hitter if he was playing baseball. But I think this is a nice pick, especially to give Ja Morant some more scoring coming off the bench. Obviously, he could be a part-time starter, but he would be a guy, if I'm in the front office with the Grizzlies, that as I continue to build my reserves, build my bench, he's a guy that can help stabilize that bench for the Memphis Grizzlies moving forward.
At 18, we find the Oklahoma City Thunder. Oh, yet again. We've all wondered what Sam Presti's been doing with all of these picks. So, Gary, you are Sam Presti today. This is your third pick now. You have them selecting Jalen Johnson. He played about 13 games for Duke before shutting it down and preparing for the draft. So, Gary, or I should say Sam Presti, tell us why you select him.
Amanda, you're going to sense a theme here. With Oklahoma City, I've said it multiple times. I'm taking big swings on young prospects who have the best chance to be a star one day. That's the reason you collect all these picks. It's not to ensure you get somebody good every time. Think of it as darts, and you're trying to hit a bullseye. The more darts you got, in the first round of NBA draft, the better. And you probably won't hit on all of them. In fact, you almost certainly won't hit on all of them. But can you hit on one? Can you hit on two? Can you get somebody special with one of these picks? And that's why I'm taking Jalen Johnson here, because he's not a sure thing, but he does have a chance to be special. He's somebody who a year ago, if we were discussing the 2021 NBA draft, probably would have been in everybody's top 10, but things did not go well at Duke. You mentioned that he shut it down after 13 games. That's a nice way to put it. The other way would be to say that he quit his team in the middle of the season, the second that his minutes got decreased, that his role became limited because they couldn't win with him on the court. And that's an obvious concern. I know that some NBA front office executives won't care much about that, but it does bother me to some degree. What does it say about you? Why didn't you fight through it? The list of players who have actually quit a college basketball team mid-season to, quote, prepare for the NBA draft is pretty short. James Wiseman did it at Memphis and then had a disappointing year in Golden State before suffering a season-ending injury. And so that's a concern, at least for me, with Jalen Johnson. But if you could take that and set it to the side, this is somebody who, plays on the wing, has great size. He's a great athlete. He's devastating in transition. He can really rebound well for his position. He's got to be more consistent with the three-point shot. And I know somebody might hear me say that and say, well, he shot above 40% from three at Duke. and that is true, but it was only on 1.4 attempts per game. So I'm not sure how much that proves. And his free throw percentage was low, which is usually an indicator of somebody who is not a great shooter. So there are things to work on, the most obvious one being that jump shot. But if you're getting somebody who is committed to the game, and who had his own reasons for walking away from the Duke program, but they're not reasons that bother you, and they're not reasons that are going to impact what he is as a professional, then just from a pure talent perspective, you're getting a real steal at this point in the draft.
We go to 19, where we find the Knicks, one of the biggest surprise teams of this past season. Avery Johnson, you have them selecting Sharife Cooper. He scored or assisted on nearly half of all of Auburn's points while on the floor. We've got other coaches calling him electric. So what sort of electricity will a team get with him?
Yeah, Sharife Cooper, he is electrifying. Another kid I've watched on the AAU circuit for years. Very, very crafty. He is a floor general. Scrappy on the defensive end. He's got to improve his jump shot on a consistent basis, but he's undersized, but what he lacks in size, he makes up for it with heart, tenacity. This kid was a showstopper in high school. I mean, he was selling out everywhere he went. People were coming from all over the state of Georgia to watch this kid play. But he's just got that it factor. And when you look at the Knicks, Elfrid Payton starting for the Knicks, you're not going to see that instant replay again. I don't see them re-signing him. Derrick Rose is a little bit older. There's been some talks with the Knicks about trading for Colin Sexton from the Cleveland Cavaliers. So that would make sense. So even if they were to trade for Colin and Colin steps into the starting role, this would be a nice pickup for them, for him to learn from a guy like Derrick Rose, and then get some more playing time as the season moves on, and especially when Derrick Rose decides to retire. So this kid, he fits Broadway. Broadway, the Knicks, Spike Lee, they would all love this kid. He's just got that personality and that swag or confidence about him, but he really knows how to play the game and make his teammates better while also being a scoring threat on the offensive end.
With the 20th overall pick, Gary Parrish has the Atlanta Hawks selecting Chris Duarte. Mick Cronin says he was the best defensive guard in the nation. Gary, what does the team get with him?
Amanda, I've taken enough 19-year-olds. I mentioned earlier that that would be my priority if I were selecting for a franchise that is in a rebuild, like Oklahoma City, like Orlando. Atlanta is obviously not in a rebuild. They were really good this season and should be really good again next season. So if you can find somebody who can step in and play immediately, that's what you should do here. And I don't know that there are 5 players in this draft who are better equipped to step in and play real minutes in the NBA from day one than Chris Duarte. He was the National Junior College Player of the Year before enrolling at Oregon and leading Dana Altman's Ducks to a pair, back-to-back, outright Pac-12 titles. He's 6'5", shot above 40% from three-point range. It sounds simple, but not enough guys can do this in the NBA. He can dribble it, he can pass it, he can shoot it. He knows how to play. The downside for some front offices is going to be that he is 24 years old. More than 4 years older than a lot of the players, and nearly 5 years older than a lot of the players who are going to be selected in this draft. And I understand, like if you're Orlando or Oklahoma City, maybe that's not something that interests you. But if you have a team that is built to contend already, then I don't care that he's 24 years old at all. I just flip that into a positive and say, this is a guy who can be in my rotation as a shot maker and an on-ball defender on opening night. And there aren't many rookies who are going to be able to do that, especially rookies selected this deep in the first round. So I love Chris Duarte in this range. And if Atlanta ended up with him, I promise you that would be a Hawks team that wins 50 games next season. And Chris Duarte would be a part of it. He would contribute in meaningful ways.
So taking a look at picks 11 through 20 there, we'll touch on a couple at the top. Avery has Charlotte selecting Corey Kispert. Both Avery and Gary agreeing that he is the best shooter in this draft. Isaiah Jackson going to the Spurs. Gary saying, look, he's not a finished product yet. He's far from it, but he can do things that you just can't teach. And then Avery has the Pacers selecting Jared Butler. Mark Few saying he's a complete player. Avery saying, you know what? I've watched this kid since he was young. I agree he is a complete player. I can't say enough good things about him. At 21, we go back to New York. This is a pick from Dallas. Avery, you have them selecting Jeremiah Robinson Earl out of Villanova. Now, his coach says that his offensive game, he thinks, is actually going to translate better to the NBA. Do you agree?
Oh, I absolutely agree with Jay Wright. And we know Jay Wright is an assistant coach on our national team that's headed to the Olympics, so good luck to them. Jay Wright knows what pros look like. He's got one in Mikal Bridges that was playing in the finals with the Phoenix Suns. Now, Jeremiah Robinson Earl doesn't quite have the outside game consistently like Mikal Bridges, but he's a defender. He's a big body. If for some reason the Knicks loses their first round lottery pick from last year, Obi Toppin in the draft, in the trade, because they're trying to trade for Colin Sexton or, Damian Lillard. Now, Jeremiah Robinson Earl steps in and provides that defense and rebounding. Tom Thibodeau is a defensive coach. The Knicks are not really an offensive team. They're a team that puts on their hard hat. They play rough, tough basketball, a lot of physical plays. And Jeremiah Robinson Earl, his skill set fits in with Tom Thibodeau, the coach of the Knicks, is looking for, as he's transformed that culture, helped lead them to a 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. And as they're looking to take that next step, he's got to continue to draft players and sign players that fit the mold of what he's looking for.
At 22 overall, we find the Lakers. Gary has them selecting Trey Mann out of Florida. Now, this is somebody who went from averaging 5 points per game as a freshman to 16 as a sophomore. Gary, he didn't quit in the middle of the season, but he did take off at the end of it. How do you feel about that?
The Trey Mann story is a story a lot of heralded high school prospects who don't immediately burst onto the scene when they enter college. His story is one that they should probably pay attention to. Avery knows this better than I. So often, these 16, 17-year-old high school prospects who are ranked in the top 10 or 15, 20 of their class see themselves in mock draft, legitimately or otherwise. They almost make up their mind before they even step foot on a college campus that I'm going to be a one and done, for better or worse. I think B.J. Boston is probably a good example of that right now. He went to Kentucky as a projected lottery pick, was not good at Kentucky, will not be picked in the first round, might not be picked at all, but he was going to be a one and done no matter what. Trey Mann, took the opposite approach. I've never talked to Trey about this, but I'm certain he thought that he was going to spend 1 year at Florida. Then he went to Florida and he just wasn't that good, couldn't play, and decided to come back to school, as opposed to jump into something he so clearly wasn't ready for. And then he grew 2 inches. He went from 6'3" to 6'5", and he became a real shooter. He put in the work and shot above 40% from three-point range in his sophomore year of college. He's not an explosive athlete, but he's got enough stuff to his game to be a real shot creator on the wing. And for the LA Lakers, this is the type of player you need. I mean, we are getting to the phase of LeBron James' career where he's about to be a power forward and Anthony Davis is about to be the center. Not just switching to that at the end of the games, but maybe starting that way. And when you've got 2 elite, future Hall of Fame talents like that, you need to surround them with as much shooting as you can. And if you've got a guard out of Florida who shot above 40% from three-point range as a sophomore, and he's got some size, and the fact that he grew from 6'3" to 6'5" after his freshman year suggests that he might still be growing. So this could be somebody who ends up 6'6", 6'7", maybe even 6'8". And those guys, people that size who can consistently shoot from the perimeter, they're valuable to every NBA franchise, especially one that is trying to surround stars with shooting like the Lakers need to be doing.
Avery, the Rockets have back-to-back picks at 23 and 24, so you get to select the 23rd overall pick for the Rockets there. You have them taking Matthew Hurt from Duke, led the ACC in scoring. What else do we need to know about Matthew Hurt?
Yeah, Matthew Hurt comes from a long family of basketball. His brother Michael Hurt played at Minnesota, so he's a kid that maybe 2 or 3 years ago was probably projected in the lottery because of his three-point shooting prowess. He has range. Once he gets that ball above his head, it's hard to contest his shot. But I think this is a really solid fit for Houston. He's going to improve his post-up game. And I think he'll end up being a stretch four in the NBA, especially with the way Houston likes to play. This is a total rebuild for Stephen Silas. So now you just got to make sure you don't get it wrong in the draft. And I think if they draft Matthew Hurt, they've gotten it right.
Houston selects 23 and 24, so we go to the 24th overall pick for the Rockets there. Gary, you have them selecting an interesting player, Kai Jones. He grew up in the Bahamas as a track and field athlete, didn't play organized basketball until the age of 15. So what sort of talent does he have at such a young age?
Well, if Avery's going to give the Rockets a stretch four, Matthew Hurt, might as well give him a stretch five in Kai Jones. This is the type of pick where you're betting on somebody to become something they've never been. Now, these things do often work out in the NBA, but whereas Evan Mobley was a great college player and Cade Cunningham was a great college player and Jalen Suggs was a great college player, Kai Jones was just a guy on a good Texas team. He has never been incredibly productive in 2 years of college, but he's shown enough signs of stuff that translate to the NBA level that he's worth a serious consideration in this range. You mentioned the athleticism. It's there. He can rim protect. He moves well on the court, can guard in space, and he did shoot 38% from three-point range on limited attempts, but still has shown the ability to theoretically be a stretch five someday. So this is a roll of the dice, undeniably, but it's worth doing at this point in the draft.
With the 25th overall pick, Avery has the Clippers selecting Greg Brown out of Texas. Avery, this is somebody who was a top 10 recruit. What do you think about him now?
Yeah, he really didn't have a really good freshman season. Kai Jones, his teammate, and maybe this is why, Gary, they got upset so early in the tournament. Great potential. We always use the word potential. He has the potential. He has the size. He's long. He's athletic. Not a very good shooter. This kid is one of those kids when things started spiraling out of control, especially during certain times in the game, he really could never recalibrate and get himself back on track. So I just think from a maturity standpoint, he's got a lot of growing to do, like a lot of the kids in this draft. But if you talk to any of the scouts in mock drafts 2 years ago, this kid was in the lottery. So he's falling a little bit. I don't believe he's going to fall out of the first round, but I think this would be a good spot for him later in the first round.
At 26, we head to Denver. Gary has them selecting Zaire Williams. Now, let me get this out here. So he played at Sierra Canyon with LeBron's son, Bronny. Of course, we know that. But then also Dwayne Wade's son, Zaire. So we got Zaire playing with Zaire. Gary, tell me about the one going into the draft.
Coach mentioned that a year ago Greg Brown would have been a lottery pick, and I think that's true. And you could probably say the same thing about Zaire Williams. It's going to be interesting, Amanda, to see how these one and done shake out, because some of them were better prospects than players. You had great players like Cade Cunningham and Evan Mobley, but then you've got the Jalen Johnsons and the Zaire Williams and the Greg Browns. And was their lackluster freshman season, was it a reflection of they're just not as good as we thought? Or was it pandemic induced because they didn't get the same type of summer that normal freshmen in normal times get? And they didn't get the same type of preseason stuff and the same type of non-league stuff. Did they struggle because of circumstances that were out of all of our control? I can't speak about that definitively, but it is something that NBA front office executives have brought up to me. So with Zaire Williams, you're hoping he can be what you thought he was a year ago before he played an uneven season at Stanford. And if he becomes that, then you're talking about a 6'8" scorer who can play make and really cause a lot of problems on the wing. He's more prospect than player. Nobody would argue otherwise, but he's still an intriguing prospect, even if his one season at Stanford did not go perfectly.
At 27, we find the Brooklyn Nets. Avery has them selecting Trey Murphy. Avery, he made some history while there at Virginia, but what can he look like in the NBA?
Well, I think he can be outstanding in the NBA. I had one of his games when he played at Rice on CBS Sports Network. But, his kid's skilled. He can shoot it, got good size. I think, his game translated to Virginia. They're not they're a low-scoring team, and he still, averaged, at 12 points a game. A very underrated athlete. But I like his skill set. I like how he's going to translate, especially to a team like Brooklyn. They need rookies that can come in and play day one, because with the big three in their injury history, you don't know who's going to be healthy. Kevin Durant, was out for almost a year. James Harden has had injury problems and came into the season out of shape. Kyrie Irving obviously injured his ankle in the Milwaukee series. I don't see those guys playing 82 games next year, so you need that depth on the bench. Joe Harris, had some really good moments as the fourth wheel after the big three. So I just think they need rookies. He's a little bit older in terms of, he's not a one and done. He's played 3 years in college. So I think they need somebody later in the draft that can come in and contribute right out of the gate.
We are nearing the end. Let's go to the Philadelphia 76ers with the 28th overall pick. Gary has them selecting Usman Garuba. This is EuroLeague Rising Star Award winner. And here's the thing. This is the award for the top player in the league under 22. He was only 18 years old, Gary Parrish, when he won it. What sort of future are we looking at here?
Well, Amanda, we obviously don't know what Philadelphia's roster is going to look like on opening night. Is Ben Simmons a part of it or not? So it's hard to really, draft for fit here, because you don't know exactly what you're trying to fit where. But if you want to get tougher, if you want to get better defensively, then Usman Garuba is terrific at this range in the draft. I mean, we're talking about somebody who is 6'8", 230 pounds, really, really put together. He's strong, it's super strong for somebody his age. Usually when we're talking about an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old, we're talking about somebody that's got to add strength. And obviously, every 18 and 19-year-old does. And Garuba needs to as well, but not to the extent that most others do. He is physically put together exceptionally well. He really guards with a purpose, and isn't just physically gifted enough to guard, but he understands how to play defense. Like, he's smart, and he's going to get you tough, and he's going to get you better defensively pretty quickly. When I talk to people about him, and I should be transparent here, I've seen most of these American players in person for years. I've obviously never been in the gym with Usman Garuba, but I've watched a lot of film, and when I talk to people who have seen him in person, they rave about what he is, but also what he can be. We're talking about all NBA defensive potential very quickly in his career. That's what some people think is possible. And if you think that's possible for somebody who's available this deep in the draft, you snatch him up and you feel good about it.
Let's go to the Phoenix Suns, maybe dabbing a few tears. With the 29th overall pick, Avery has them selecting Josh Christopher. Avery, Josh got off to a great start, but ended up missing 10 games with an injury. And after that, his scoring really tailed off. So if he can get those medicals right, what can we expect?
Well, I put on my glasses like my buddy Gary Parrish because I've had a chance to really examine this kid's game. He's got really good size. He's kind of got that Joe Dumars type of stature, strong body, really good slasher. He's got to improve his three-point range. He's a real boisterous kid. He's one of those kids that exudes confidence on and off the floor. He always talks about how he was born to be a pro. So I had a chance to watch him quite a bit. Bobby Hurley was been high on this kid. Sure, he did have an up and down freshman year like a lot of these kids. Another kid that in some of the mock drafts 2 or 3 years ago had him going, in the top 10. But I think for the Suns, they keep him in Arizona. He joins a team that lost in the finals. He's got a lot to prove, because if he gets drafted 29, he's going to believe that he should have gotten drafted 9th or 10th. So he's going to play with that chip on his shoulder. Really good mid-range game, energetic defender, which is going to help with the Suns. So I think he helps reinforce that bench with Cam Payne and Cam Johnson. I think he finds a way into the rotation.
The glasses look good, Avery. I really like them. All right, we have made it to the end. The Utah Jazz with the 30th overall pick. Gary Parrish gets the final say here, and he has them selecting Ayo Dosunmu, consensus first-team All-American. He looked like a superhero with the mask on, Gary, I should say. He's barely making it into the first round, so why take him here?
I love him because he's ready to play. And this is also somebody who got better every year he was in college. Like, the knock on him after his sophomore season was he can't shoot. He's a shooting guard who can't shoot. And that's why he ultimately came back to school. And then he showed to be a competent shooter. Now, is he, somebody who's going to win a three-point shooting competition someday? Probably not. But he became a competent shooter year over year. And, what that suggests is that he listened to what front office executives told him when he went through the pre-draft process after his sophomore season, and then he committed to doing the things that they asked him to do to put himself in a position to be a first-round pick. When you are Utah, you're ready to win right now. I know that they got bounced earlier than they wanted to get bounced in these 2021 playoffs, but they're popping right back in 2022 trying to win an NBA title. And so at that point, you're preferring to add somebody to your roster who can help. You saw when Mike Conley got hurt in the playoffs, the Jazz were still good, but they needed more backcourt help. Ayo Dosunmu adds backcourt help immediately, and not everybody's going to have him going in the top 30, but I like the fit in Utah.
All right, so that is it. CBS Sports' latest mock draft, taking a look at the latest picks there, 21 through 30. A trend here from both Gary and Avery was selecting young players, maybe from overseas here in the States. Some players not even starting organized basketball until they were 15, but taking a big chance on them, hoping they pay out in the NBA draft as well. Taking a look at the rest of the latest mock draft lottery recap picks there. Of course, Cade Cunningham going #1 overall to the Pistons, followed by Jalen Green, Evan Mobley, Jalen Suggs. Gary said he really feels like there's a big drop-off between 4 and 5. Of course, we'll see what happens in the NBA draft 1 week from today. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.